We're now joined by Andy Staples, who writes at The Athletic. He's got a podcast, the ASS, or the Andy Staples Show. You know, it just works sometimes. Sirius XM radio host and other things. And Andy, in the South, we do things differently a little bit. We do things like call it the Kroger or Walmart's, or sometimes we just have a word that means the same thing, like putting all in front of y'all.
I live south of you, right? You do realize I live south of you. So
yes, I understand.
I've never lived north. I've never lived north of Knoxville. So
no, I was including you in that. I was where I was headed. It was a long way of saying I thought the introduction or the title for your article, the SEC versus all y'all, when all and y'all are obviously the same thing, was absolutely spot on for this subject matter.
It does. That's what everybody wants, whether it's the SEC people or the non-SEC people. And that's, I've just been trying to figure out since the playoff negotiations fell apart, because Greg Sankey came out and said, well, maybe the SEC won't support a 12-team playoff next time. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like, yeah, because the 12-team playoff would have been pretty good for the SEC. Better than the 14 playoff would be for the SEC. So I'm like, okay, what does he mean by that? And so I'm trying to figure out what they can do differently that would actually be advantageous to them. So I threw out this idea of they have their own tournament. The SEC has its own 6-team or 8-team football tournament, and they crown a champion at the end of the third round. And you do that on January 1st, and you make it 8 p.m., which is when the Sugar Bowl is now. And then if the other leagues want to have a playoff, they can, and their champ can play the SEC's champ if they want, or they don't have to. That seems to be, if you're Greg Sankey, if you're the SEC and you want to play hardball, that would be how you do it. And it's interesting because it's very similar to how Jim Delaney, the former Big Ten commissioner, what he would say when they were trying to get the playoff off the ground and the Big Ten didn't want a playoff. He'd say, well, we'll just go back to the old bowl system. The difference was, if you went back to the old bowl system, then if you're the Big Ten, you wouldn't have made as much money. But now, if you do what I said, whether you're the SEC, the Big Ten could also do this too, by the way. If the Big Ten did it, it would do gangbusters money. But you would make more money than everybody else. Like, you getting that from your tournament would be more money than everybody doing theirs 10 ways.
Yeah. There's so many layers to this, and I guess maybe the thing that I'm most intrigued by is this a deal where Greg Sankey's playing chicken, and he 100% is willing to not swerve, to just wait for everybody else to swerve, but he's also okay with if nobody else swerves, that's fine. We'll crash. Fine.
I remember talking to somebody about this when Texas and Oklahoma, when they said they were coming to the SEC. And this is when they said, okay, well, we're going to pause the playoff. Because remember, that 12-team playoff was headed toward a rubber stamp before all that happened. And people said, oh, okay, we need to see if there was an ulterior motive here. I don't blame them for that. I would think the same thing. But I started going through the options of, okay, what if they're really mad? What if they say, well, we're not going to do this. Well, we're not going to do what the SEC wants. We're all going to band together. And it occurred to me that once Texas and Oklahoma get there, they've built the SEC into the better mousetrap at that point. Like, they're going to win any way you go because they have the strongest league. They have teams everybody wants to see. Now, the Big Ten probably still going to make more money. That has to do with demographics. That has to do with population. That has to do with living alumni. It has to do with the timing of the TV deals. But the SEC and the Big Ten are going to be fairly close together. And the Big Ten could do all this if it wanted to do as well. That's the only other league besides the SEC that can really do this sort of thing, that could play chicken. But if you're the SEC, you could go it alone. Like, you could be a standalone product and make a bunch of money and have happy fans. And I don't think there would be, it wouldn't be as good as it could be, but they could live with it for long enough to bleed everybody else out. So that's why if you're Greg Sankey, you can play chicken. The only person you really can't play chicken with is Kevin Warren of the Big Ten. If they were to get into a, one's coming at the other, which is not what's going on right now, then it's a little bit different story. But as long as they're saying, well, we won't work with these other guys, that's fine, because the other guys are praying that you have a national playoff that makes them more money because they need it, because they're so far behind the Big Ten and the SEC. So, we're talking about the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12, all those conferences. They need that. The SEC and the Big Ten don't need them. And the thing is, you can't have a national playoff without the SEC and the Big Ten. If the ACC said we don't want to do it, the others would be like, okay, who cares? If the Pac-12 said we don't want to do it, everybody would be like, who cares? Except obviously the fans of the teams in those leagues. But for the most part, the world would go on. TV would be like, yes, this is a national tournament. This is the national champion. But if you didn't have the SEC teams, and if you didn't have Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, Wisconsin, then the champion of that is not the national champion. If either one of those leagues isn't in it, the champion of that tournament is not the national champion.
So I asked someone kind of up the ladder not too terribly long ago. I said, in the event that the SEC did this split off, like we're going to go it ourselves, I said, is 16 enough? And there was kind of a hesitation, and it was like, maybe. But don't you think there'd be 4 or 6 or 8 other schools out there that might be interested in joining this merry band of 16 brothers to go do something different than everybody else?
Well, and see, that's where I think the Pac-12 and the ACC messed this up, because let's say there are schools that are interested in that, and we know there are. Let's say there are schools that want to be part of that type of collective. Well, there's several that want to be part of the SEC as that type of collective, and several that would want to be part of the Big Ten as that type of collective. And what these guys may have done by not voting for this 12-team playoff, which would have at least guaranteed them being somewhat special for a little bit longer. I'm talking about the ACC and the Pac-12 here. We don't know if they're going to be special enough when the next round of negotiation comes. And the ACC's grant of rights seems strong. Seems like you wouldn't be able to pick that apart. But if suddenly some of the top programs in the ACC were like, this sucks. This TV deal lasts until 2036. We got to do something different. Well, there are ones that would probably be welcome in a larger SEC, and there are probably ones that would be welcome in a larger Big Ten.
Last thing, and I think this is all we've got time for. The Notre Dame piece of this is fascinating to me. I've had multiple people tell me the ACC thinks that Notre Dame is its trump card.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Notre Dame participates in the ACC in every sport but football. They did it the one time last year in COVID. I feel like I heard somewhere that there was language that if Notre Dame ever joined a conference, it had to be the ACC. Do you know if that's accurate?
As long as this deal's in place. So it's not forever, but yes. But
so through 2036?
Yeah, but they're not joining a conference in football. They're just not. And I mean, this is why the ACC can give you whatever reason they want, but the real reason that you would, if you're the ACC, the financial reason that you would want to be against a 12-team playoff is if you have a 12-team playoff that has 6 at-large spots, Notre Dame never, ever has to join a conference in football. So you can't pressure them in, you can't force them. So that would be the reason. But the thing is, people don't understand how important independence is to Notre Dame. They would lose as much in donations as they would gain from the TV deal that they would strike. Yeah. Like, it's a big deal. Like, the school is what it is because of football independence. It goes back to the turn of the 20th century. Fielding Yost is the coach at Michigan. Notre Dame beats Michigan. Fielding Yost is like, oh, you guys cheated. We don't want to play you anymore. And then gets the rest of the Western Conference, which is the Proto Big Ten, to stop playing them. So Notre Dame has to go east to play Army. They have to go south to Texas. They have to go west to play USC. And they go from being the sleepy little Catholic school in South Bend, Indiana, to the most famous Catholic school in America. That increases all of the number of applications. That makes it a much better academic school because they have a much larger pool of applicants to pick from. And so they believe rightly that the school is what it is because of football independence.
Fascinating stuff. I learned something there. I did not know that, and it's a really cool background.
I get the Notre
story.
Dame speech a lot. It's hard for people to understand why, like, because they could join the Big Ten and make a fortune in TV money, way more
Sure
than
they could.
NBC, but they don't need to.
Yeah. They're in pretty good shape. Hey, really fascinating article. If you haven't read it, check it out on The Athletic, the SEC versus all y'all. Andy Staples from The Athletic.